I'm Ken Canera, and this is Beyond Consulting. Today, we welcome Nishant Mathur to the studio. Nishant is the VP of Product at Oyo. He's also a former BCG consultant. Nishant, thanks so much for joining.
Thank you so much for having me, Ken. It's a pleasure.
You bet. So Nishant's joining us from Dallas today. So the weather in Dallas is a little balmy from what Nishant was telling me at the start of the show. But besides the weather, maybe you could just give us a little bit of color on your background and your story.
Yeah, just one thing on the weather, I would say, I don't think I've ever used this much sunscreen in my life, ever. So, this is the craziest heat I've seen. But just a bit about myself, Ken. So I studied engineering at the Indian Institute of Technology. As you may know, it's one of the most selective colleges for engineering in India. I pursued that with my MBA at Indian Institute of Management, which is an even more selective school. I really enjoyed my MBA, got a scholarship, and then straight away joined BCG. I spent 8 years at BCG, where I led over 20 projects across 7 countries. I think it was one of the best work experiences I've ever had. I worked in strategy, M&A, org design, operations, cost reduction, go-to-market, you name it. I had an amazing time, worked with some of the smartest people I know. Then while I was at BCG, I got a chance to be a strategy ambassador to its internal think tank called Strategy Institute. That's when I started studying a lot about platforms, about technology companies, how companies like Apple, Amazon are basically disrupting the world by working in sort of an ecosystem of companies. This curiosity led me to research a bit more about tech companies in general and platforms. And then an opportunity arrived with Retail Me Not, which was the company I joined after my consulting career. So Retail Me Not is a leading savings platform which connects millions of customers to, over 70,000 brands. And I led strategy, FP&A, business operations. It was my first experience with tech. I learned so much. It helped me understand a lot about products, product management, working with engineers, and just how two-sided platforms work. After that, I wanted to work in more like a growth stage company, and I got an opportunity with Oyo. So many of you may not know Oyo. Oyo is one of the world's largest hospitality tech platforms. It's, the world's third most downloaded travel app, and it serves over 157,000 storefronts. And essentially, it provides them with technology and software to help increase their revenues and ease their operations. And as a result, provides affordable and, quality accommodation to customers. So Oyo behaves like a startup. I've done tons of things. I started as a chief of staff and spent around 2 years working on some of the most critical projects for the company. And then most recently, I've become part of the product organization where I'm a VP of product management. I lead 2 teams, one that deals with product operations, which is the entire product machinery, building the strategy, the roadmap, quarterly prioritization, analytics, and communications. And the other team I lead is I manage their B2B products, where we serve thousands of clients and help sell millions of room nights a year to our B2B clients.
Excellent. Great background. And I want to talk about a lot of things today. I want to talk about product management at Oyo. I want to talk about your role as a chief of staff there as well. And I also want to hear about the FP&A work that you did at Retail Me Not. But Let's start off by just giving maybe the listeners a little bit, maybe an example of what Oyo does in terms of kind of like a solution that they could wrap their head around.
Yeah, I think the problem that Oyo is trying to solve for is that there are thousands and actually millions of small hotels and homes in the world which are run by, independent owners. They are not managed by brands, and they have actually been untouched by technology, right? They are often not online. If they're online, they're only on one platform. They don't have the right content. They don't have the right pricing. And what Oyo is trying to do is bring the best technology to these sort of underserved segment. And as a result, this creates a lot more inventory in the market, which opens up much more choices for consumers. And as a result, consumers can actually get accommodation at a lower price than they would have had. In terms of the technology which we are providing, we actually are full stack. So we start all the way from providing them demand. And it could be demand through our own direct demand channel, like the Oyo app, or it could be through, OTAs as well. So we have partnerships with all the OTAs in the world. It doesn't matter to us where the money comes from, as long as they get bookings from anything. We work on content. So one of the most important things is a lot of these hotels don't have the right photographs, don't have the right descriptions. And we basically use a lot of our algorithms to, one, get them better photographs, and also just sequencing them better so that they get more clicks. We manage pricing. A lot of these people, often resort to fixed pricing. And what we provide to them is dynamic pricing through which we actually are able to modify their prices every hour, every minute. And we look at the competition and are actually able to maximize their RevPAR so that you're not only, going after the higher prices, you maximize total revenue made per room. We work on reconciliation. So this is, a bit messy, but each of them have relations with each OTA. Then they have bills coming from them. They have to settle them. We basically automate it all and we bring it all together. We also work on guest experience. So we have built chatbots through which, they can actually resolve queries of their customers. Otherwise, they have to be on the phone all the time. We also have, hotel management system. So it's a cloud-based HMS, which, is landing with them on their iPad or their phone or whatever they want to use, and they can do their check-in, check-out from there. We also help them in their marketing endeavors. So we launch a lot of products through which they can invest their extra dollars by encouraging bookings from one channel or the other. So the overall objective is that individually these things can be done by different players, right? We bring it all together so it's easy for the hotel or the homeowner, and what they can just focus then on is the most important thing, which is serving the customer, right? Instead of all the administrative things that, they often end up spending time with.
Excellent. And I'm sure you see all sorts of kind of like, gains for these types of, I mean, you're essentially serving the long tail of the market
Yeah.
and freeing up their time. And I'm sure there's a tremendous value for them.
Yeah. I think our sort of research has shown that typically a hotel pre-OYO, let's say it's making 1x, it ends up making anywhere between 1.5x to 2.3x after it joins OYO.
Oh, wow. Okay. That's significant. That's really big. Okay, great. No, that's really helpful because that really paints a much clearer picture of kind of what OYO does. Let's start with product management. So you're a VP of product management at OYO. What does that mean and how did you get into it?
So it's very interesting. So I'd always been interested in product management ever since I moved to the tech industry. Because I can't be an engineer. So, I guess the next best thing is to, manage products. But joke aside, I think product management is a broader term. I think the way it is used mostly these days is about, software products or technical products or hardware. But it can be anything, right? A product manager is ultimately in charge of a solution that is solving a client's need. And the key thing is the product manager is that connective tissue between the ultimate user of the product and the ones who make it. And more specifically, in a software or a tech world, the product manager is that person who is responsible for making sure that the engineers are building exactly the right solutions that will solve a customer's need, right? So that's sort of the broad description. I think going specifically on a day-to-day basis, product management has become one of the more important jobs today, is because a lot more companies are trying to solve their problems or trying to provide solutions in the form of products rather than people. Earlier, it was easy. You just, send people to do a job and it will be done. But, as you try to scale, it's always best to do it through technology-driven products. And so therefore, this person who is in this, in an incredible position of understanding what the customer wants, converting it into technical requirements, making sure the engineers bring the right solution, test it out, and ultimately be responsible for the success. Is a fantastic role that has emerged. And how I personally got into it is when OYO was hit by the pandemic, we actually stopped and we tried to look at, what do we need to do differently? Because, in March 2020 or April 2020, we saw 80% of our bookings go away overnight.
Wow.
Right?
Wow.
So that could, shut down a company overnight. And it's a miracle of hard work and, thankfully some good decisions that we took that we survived 2020. And then we used 2021 to be, our year of resurgence. And OYO had always, had tons of products, but we renewed our focus on it. We almost doubled our efforts on making sure that every solution that we give to our customers are done through products. My manager became the CPO, and as his chief of staff, my first role was to first help set up the product organization, Basically, we carved it
Mm-hmm.
out of our existing teams. We shuffled some of our central organizations and built that into product organization. The first step was just setting it up, building out all the processes, making sure they talk to the businesses, making sure we're solving the most important problems. And then I personally was given charge of one of the product lines to make sure it continues to deliver results. So we had a very healthy B2B business. Obviously, like during the pandemic, it fell down a bit, and I was given the responsibility to make sure that we continue to grow that business, grow it more on the basis of products than people, and also make sure we continue to improve our take rate from that. So that led me to product management, and I've really enjoyed it. I think it's amazing that, like, I'll give you some stories. Like, for a recent product, we basically wanted to solve a problem where we want to invest the marketing dollars of patrons into the right channels to increase their demand, right? So if they want more demand from a certain channel, we can launch a product where we can get incremental, dollars from them and thereby drive demand. So the problem seems very straightforward. A lot of people do it, but as a journey into product management, it went all the way from first talking to the patrons and understanding what they want, right? Second, trying to figure out what is the right pricing, right? How much should you charge them? What should be the different layers? Where should you launch them? Running pilots. You launch a pilot in a small market, you get tons of learnings, right? Then designing, so you can even run offline pilots or online pilots. A lot of people think that you always have to
Mm-hmm.
make real product, but you can just like bootstrap it and just, run it with a set of. And if your network has a big reach and you have enough hotels, in the network, you can do that very easily. Then designing, basically looking at the design, making sure that you're catching the attention of a person so that they opt in for the program. So tons of things to do there. Going through UATs, finding errors when it's coded, checking all of those errors, making sure it launches. Then teaching the sales team, right? We have an inside sales and outside sales team, teaching them all about the product to make sure they pitch it correctly, right? Looking at their pitches, right? Sometimes you would want to see their entire script and say, okay, you should be saying this, you should not be saying, right? And making sure people, our hotel network, starts adopting it. And that's just one side of the problem because that's just a supply. Then there is the demand side, right? To make sure now that all your demand products are promoting this so that if somebody is paying that extra commission, they actually do get that demand, right? So working through all your products, figuring out how you can put the call to action, what kind of carousels you can put, what kind of CRM you can do. You also have a sales team on the demand side, so teaching them all about it, making sure it's important. So it's actually pretty interesting. Like it goes all the way from conceptualization to a lot of operations ultimately to make sure that the product is successful. And the best part of it is you see a product which, in the first week of launch had only 0.2% of the network adopted, and 2.5 months line, it's 20%.
Yeah.
And you're tracking that daily, and then, you're pretty happy that, okay, in 2.5 months, you got it to a pretty big state. And we wanted to go above and above. We wanted to be 50%. But,
Yeah.
it's just quite amazing, chasing those targets on a daily basis, talking to engineers, talking to operations, talking to everybody, including the customer multiple times, and making sure things are successful.
Well, it's quite comprehensive, and I think that's one thing that I probably didn't appreciate until I got out of consulting and kind of started to learn what product managers do. And I think that's why consultants make good product managers because it's not just leading a team of engineers, right? It's
Yeah.
it's it's so much more. It's
Yeah.
those other 10
Yeah.
things that you talked about,
Yeah.
right?
I think the go-to-market of any product is I would say as important as designing the product. Obviously, like a great product will not need too much, go-to-market interventions, but most products do need a lot of go-to-market interventions. Like it could be just the flyer that you send, the marketing, the CRM, right? Like and there's so much you can do. There's so much you can learn.
Excellent. You've obviously enjoyed product management in general. So for someone maybe that's considering going into a product management career or focus, any drawbacks or downsides or like minor annoyances that you didn't necessarily foresee before you kind of took on the role?
Yeah, I think I will talk about some things that should be known, and then some of the nuisances. I think let me start with the nuisances. I think a lot of products fail, right? A lot
Okay.
of products will fail,
It's
and
the nature of
you
the business.
is the nature of the business, right? And so you quickly have to learn how to do experiments and learn fast, right? Basically, like if you look at consultants, right, we don't ever expect our projects to fail, right?
No.
That's a career limiting move if the project fails, right?
Yeah,
Uh,
exactly. Yeah.
but products are often on a smaller scale. They might take a lot of time and they will fail. And there are many examples, right? Like the Amazon's phone, right? It's a perfect example of a great company, great product managers,
Yep.
great market, and it failed.
Yeah. I mean, that was after it even went to market, right?
Yeah,
So a lot of products fail before they even go to market, right?
exactly. So, and exactly, you're right. This is after going to market. So, a lot of markets will,
Yeah.
products will fail before the market. And I think you just have to be ready for that. And that's something that,
Okay.
takes time to learn. I think the second thing, I think it's very important to learn how to work with engineers. I think if you've never worked with them, it's important to, understand how important a role they play and why it is very important to, engage them, not just early on in the process, but all along the way. It's a common tendency sometimes to, just treat them as, one part of the value chain that, hey, I will make my designs and they will go implement it. But I think it's very important to make them be part of the whole process and make them co-own the outcomes. And someone who's never worked with engineers, I think it's good to like spend time and understand what drives them, what kind of things they can do, and basically learn a lot from them. Like they can probably figure out a better way to solve, than what you're probably thinking,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because they're doing it day in and night. So I think that's something that I would definitely say is important. And I think the third thing, it depends from company to company, but there's still a lot of like offline things involved with products, right? You might just think that it's all like, hey, you switch on a button and everything works, but it's not, right? Sales is still, a lot of sales is digital, but there's still a lot of like manual sales, right? A lot of fulfillment is digital, but there's still a lot of manual fulfillment. And I think it's important to understand that that will be the case, and over time you will get better and better, and at one day maybe productize it end to end. And I guess the last thing I would say, which I think is an pretty important learning, is, and this is something that takes time to get used to. I think Marty Kagan is one of like the gurus of product management, and he laid it out pretty well. That when a product succeeds, it's due to everyone involved. It's the engineers, it's the product managers, it's operation, program manager, everyone.
Mm-hmm.
But when the product fails, it's the product manager's responsibility.
That's right.
Those are the cards laid out to you. You have to
You got
abide
to
by
own
those
it.
terms.
Yeah.
You have to own it.
That's a really good point. And I guess I guess as a follow up on the second point around kind of working with the engineers, is there anything that maybe consultants that are going into call it a product manager role do better on, just like right out of the gate, right? Like, hey, like don't do this, or expect longer timelines, like because like we come out of consulting
Yeah.
working with a team of insecure overachievers that just want to please us,
Yeah.
right? And then we get into the real world and realize it doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
Any specific or tactical advice?
Yeah. I think like definitely about engineers, but everybody in general, I think it's very important to understand their constraints and what they're doing, right? You probably like remember, like you go to a case, especially when you're young, and you tend to suddenly think, hey, I know everything. These people are doing ABCD wrong, and they should be doing this better.
Yeah.
I don't know why they're not doing this better, right?
Yeah.
It's so simple.
Yeah. Let me tell them how
Let
to
me
do
tell
it.
them how to do this, right? So I would definitely say don't take that approach at all. Not anywhere, I would say, but definitely not in engineering. I think it's really important to understand that everybody is working really hard.
Okay.
Everybody's trying really hard, and they have a ton of constraints. I mean, honestly, I also like felt that when I started doing it, right, we wanted to get estimates from engineers, and they were a bit hesitant. It's a big topic, right? And some engineers never want to give time estimates. Some give stretched estimates. And we used to be very annoyed that, why are they not giving us estimates? Because we can't plan them.
Mm-hmm.
We can't plan for a product release if they can't. But the problem is, it is incredibly hard for someone to give estimates when you just give them a problem statement or a one-page document.
Yes.
Right? If you give a one-page document to them saying that, hey, I want to charge extra from, patrons so that I can divert traffic, it can mean so many things.
Yeah.
So there was a lot of like back and forth at that time that, hey, we only have this detail, you give us estimates. They were giving long estimates, and ultimately the whole planning cycle was going long. And you have to like get into the details. You have to have like very, non-judgmental and really like heart-to-heart conversations that why are they not giving those estimates? And they're not giving them because they don't get enough details, and then they are held to like unrealistic timelines.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right? And that doesn't help anybody.
Yeah.
So either you give more details, or you just go with t-shirt size and operate in a world of ambiguity. And And so there are many, many nuances to, product management, like all the way from prioritization, making sure your product gets built, making sure you're working on the right products, making sure the engineers understand it, making sure you're giving them the right details. And I would highly encourage, like, for someone who's coming into this, is to live the life of an engineer. And before sort of like, jumping into and saying, "Here, build me this."
Yeah, no, that is really good advice, yeah, because it definitely gives you an appreciation for the all the different nuances and permutations that
Yeah,
can happen, right? Because there's all sorts of integrations and everything like that
yeah.
as you start to as you once you start to kind of like the build. And then but you actually started at Oyo as a in a chief of staff capacity, is that right?
Yes, yes, I did.
Could you talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah. So when I initially joined, I've reported to the same manager, but my manager was the head of the head of the US business. He's the chief operating officer, and he was also leading the US business. And I was hired as like chief of staff slash, VP of strategic projects. And I joined in December 2019, where, we were initially, trying to make sure that we build a profitable business. So I started working on a lot of, like, top line and bottom line initiatives to make sure that the business is healthy. And then March 2020 happened and the world turned around. So obviously, like, we had to take some drastic actions to make sure, everything survived. And it was not pleasant, but, it was needed to be done. Looking back as chief of staff, like, some of the best things about a chief of staff role, or what I ended up doing, was like, you end up working on some of the most important problems, especially if you're the chief of staff of a very key executive, right? So every year I was given some of the most interesting problems. First was like just making sure the US business and the company survive. Next year, it was about standing up the product organization and building our IPO story, especially from a technology and product side. And this year, it's more around growth. What's amazing about chief of staff role, and or why, like, a lot of consultants might end up liking it, is that it's a series of very, very important projects, which is sort of what consulting also does, right?
Sure.
You are given some of the most important problems that a CXO may have, and you have to go solve them, right? And it also helps that because you've done consulting and you've solved a ton of problems, you are good with ambiguity. You know how to, structure them, how to, work with the stakeholders. For example, one of the best skills in required for chief of staff role is influencing without authority. And that is something which consultants, do day in, day out. We don't, we are not the boss of anybody in the company. We just have a mandate. But you learn to work with it. And that is a skill that is really, really needed as chief of staff, because you are not, nobody in the company is reporting to you. Often you're an IC.
Yeah.
Sometimes you may have a small team.
Yeah, and often you need inputs, right, from people who have no incentive to
Yeah,
give you inputs, right?
exactly. And you can't keep saying that, hey, my boss is so and so, so you better do this. Like, that trick doesn't work. You should definitely not do that. Otherwise, you'll
Yeah.
have a very small career as a chief of staff. Um, it's pretty important to leverage your consulting skills of, how do you talk to clients? How do you understand them? How do you influence them? How do you make them, do a certain thing that they really don't want to do? Right? How do you communicate that? And again, it depends on the environment, right? In COVID, a lot of people had to do things they never wanted to do. In a growth stage, it could be something else. And I think as a consultant, because you have done that in many, many places and with, stakeholders across all levels, you get those skills of taking on some of the most important problems of an executive, and helping solve them. Some of the things that could be different is, like, typically as a consultant, you get a team, and as chief of staff, sometimes you will have no team member. You have to do it all by yourself. Sometimes you might get like a few program managers to do it. So that's something that you have to learn, that sometimes you have to be an IC and get things done. I think typically is a good entry point for some people in a company, because it allows them to see things at a very high, at a very high level, and understand, what's going on, and then they can decide, okay, I want to go into product, so here's what I will do, or I want to, go into operations, I want to go into sales. And I think if you succeed as a chief of staff, if you're able to demonstrate that you can bring around change successfully, most of the people in the company would be happy to take you.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, especially around seeing different parts of the business, because you can kind of get a sneak peek into what you find interesting, or even the teams that you get a lot of energy
Yeah,
working with and that sort of thing.
yeah.
Okay, awesome. And obviously, you work now in hospitality technology. Prior to Oyo, you worked at Retail Me Not. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience there?
Yeah, so I think Retail Me Not is one of those, pure software businesses or pure, I would say, a tech company, which is a platform that is connecting brands to customers. So their key business model is they have tons of demand from customers who are looking to, for deals. And on the other side, there are a ton of retailers who want to target these customers and, use the deals as a way to drive sales. And ultimately, the platform matches them, helps the customer save money, and at the same time helps the retailer by making the customer purchase at their site. It was also especially useful because it was used by a lot of brands that had never been online, right? It's so basically the Kohl's, Macy's. Now, obviously, they've been in the online business for a long time, but a lot of these brands were just learning how to run their online business, and Retail Me Not was a very effective way in which they could, direct their demand or get their demand from. So I had a wonderful experience. I think it was a very well run company. They were probably better than anybody in the business in search engine optimization. They were the gurus of Google. Whenever you search for a coupon, Retail Me Not would come number one, which was very interesting. It helped them operate their business at very high level of margins because if you run SEO really well, your
Yeah.
cost of acquisition becomes really low, and therefore you're getting customers almost for free, and that's
Yeah.
that's a very, very healthy business to be in.
I wish I
So
could
I
learn how to do that.
yes, I agree. I think people there could write a book about SEO, I think. So when I joined them, I basically joined their business operations team,
Hmm.
and I was in charge of strategy. I was in charge of forecasting and annual operating plan building. A ton of FP&A activities, like I used to basically run pricing for their products. I mean, my team,
Sure.
we used to help build the sales compensation plan for the team. We used to also build the goals for the sales team. We used to help run parts of sales operations and then regular metrics reporting. So it was a really good experience for me because I learned how, like, I had a lot of fascination for platforms, and and this really helped me understand how, like, two-sided marketplaces work, and how what are the different metrics to chart, how do they actually make money, and things, and things like that.
Excellent. And that was your kind of first job directly out of consulting, right? Because you left BCG as a principal.
Yes, yes, it was my first job.
So, what was kind of like going through your head? You're a principal at BCG, and you kind of like, you're going to take this leap. I just know that a lot of our listeners kind of are finding themselves in that kind of position. Walk us through, I guess, kind of how it all happened, and your thought process.
Yeah, I think somewhere down, my career in consulting, I started thinking a lot about, like, where do I want my career to go for the next 10 years? And I didn't see that happening in the practice area that I was currently working in, right? And I always had a fascination for tech companies and, marketplaces and platforms in general. So I started researching a lot about it, and at some point, I think in 2017, I thought it's the right time for me to, probably understand, experience how these marketplaces work, understand how tech companies in general work, and whether it's a good fit. To be honest, I started by my search by actually having a very big canvas, and I think one of the things that most consultants will see is that they have tons of opportunities once they decide to leave, right? It
Yeah.
could be across industries, it could be across roles, it could be across stages of the company. And it isn't necessarily a bad thing to have. Like, it's always good to have that choice. So I started with, like, a, really, really big canvas, big Excel sheet with what I can do. Um,
You made a
and then
consulting project out
I
of
did.
your search.
I did.
Yeah.
And then I was given this really good advice by one of the, I think, people at BCG that, talk to as many people. I think it'll just drive a lot of clarity. So I talked to tons of people still in consulting, outside of consulting, people who had made several career moves. And I got a lot of good advice around why they made the change and whether that resonated. And ultimately, I think what I realized was that I wanted to be part of a sort of a medium-sized company where I can actually see a lot and have a much more powerful role and understand which parts of a typical tech company do I like or not? And that's the opportunity that came with RMN. I had, a very understanding and a very, very good manager who basically gave me, a blank canvas and said, this is how we currently do things, but, you're welcome to change and, modify this in any way you feel like. And also, I think because the company, I think I had 600 or so people, it was very easy to know what is happening across all segments. Like sometimes, and again, people can have different choices. Some people might just immediately go to a big company, knowing very clearly what they want to do. But to me, I wasn't still sure of which part of a tech company that I would really like. And so I found this role to be, particularly interesting because it one allowed me to use my consulting skills, right? FP&A is a typical place where, most consultants succeed. And the reason why they succeed a lot is they're able to bring finance and business both together, right? Sometimes finance teams, and again, it's changing, but sometimes they end up being too much about the numbers and less about the business. And consultants know in and out about the business. And I think a good FP&A person combines both finance and numbers and business together so that, they are actually looking at the numbers in the right way and helping drive the right, business outcomes. It's not just about reports. It's about delivering the right insight that will change the business. And therefore, like FP&A is often a very, very good role for someone to step into. To me, it helped. I understood the business really in and out. I understood the P&L. I understood which parts of the business make money. It helped me make better operating plans. It helped me build the right business strategies. And being in consulting, I always had a soft corner for sales teams. So I was like sort of the, business operations liaison for the sales team. So I could definitely, like, after selling a few cases, you realize how hard sales is. And so I definitely had
Yeah.
a soft corner for them and therefore worked extensively on making sure, they are set up for success. And so because the role had those dimensions as well, I found it super interesting and I thought I could add a lot of value. So that's how I sort of made my decision.
I appreciate you sharing that story because I think one of the things that you mentioned was talk to a lot of people, right? And it's amazing because, like, as consultants, we often, I think, okay, we'll do our research. We look online. We think we know a lot about a topic. And actually, the reason I'm bringing it up is part of what you just said was the genesis for this show,
Yeah.
because there's nuances that you just don't kind of pick up on until you actually talk to people, and it's not so easy either, right?
Yeah.
But by doing it, I really think it's such a great way to do your diligence, right? Actually, speaking of diligence, right? I mean, that's how you perform a commercial due diligence,
Yeah.
right? You do your research, but you also have to talk to a
Yeah.
lot of customers,
Yeah.
right? And it's kind of the same. I've never actually made that connection until you just you just told your story. So thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's just like learning never stops, right? It's very, you're right. And I would agree, like when I left consulting, I thought like, I know everything. You know, I've worked with Fortune 500 CXOs, but learning never stops. And
Yeah.
you talk to people in Facebook and you understand how that works. You talk to people in startups and understand how that works. You talk to people in non-tech companies. And the great thing about consulting is if you leave consulting, you can join FP&A, you can join finance, you can be product manager, you can do product marketing, you can do sales operations, you can do HR if you like from a org role, you can do sales,
Yeah.
right? You can do customer success, right? There is so much you can do, right? And so it's always good to talk to people who have done this, understand, also then talk to yourself and say that, okay, which part of my consulting cases I like the most? You can do all of it, but what did you like the most? Which industry did you like the most? And then when you talk to people, when you step back, take notes, I think it helps you eventually get to an answer. And it could be ambiguous in the first month, right? In the first month, you'll be like, what do I do? Everything looks cool. But I think after some conversations in
Yeah.
a month or so, you'll be realizing that, okay, this makes sense for me.
I think that's right. And lastly, just before we wrap up, besides the Beyond Consulting podcast, we just wanted to see, Nishant, are there any blogs, books, or podcasts or YouTube channels that you kind of follow or read or recommend to our guests as they're kind of thinking about their journey in their career?
Two books that I like a lot and that I would recommend. The first is Principles by Ray Dalio.
Okay,
I
love
think,
that book. Yeah.
yeah, it's. I think most people probably know about it, but I just found it fascinating. I think it one tells his whole life story, which is quite incredible to read, but also the way some of the ways or the framework in which he has laid out on how to think about life and work is quite incredible, and most consultants would like it. But I think some of the things that still stick to me is like just embracing reality and dealing with it. I think it is a very, very interesting statement, which a lot of people often miss out, or being radically open-minded. Your mind thinks you're going here, but just being open and finding like three points of views for everything, and ultimately how to make better decisions. I think it's a fascinating book that I would recommend. The second, so my dad studied psychology. I was always interested in psychology as a kid, and there's a book called Influence by Robert Cialdini. It's an amazing book which talks about how and why people make decisions they do, right? And it's a pretty eye-opening book. I think it's highly recommended to anybody in sales because it talks a lot about how some of the best salespeople in the world are able to, trick not necessarily able to convince their customers, but it's also pretty eye-opening
Yeah.
to yourself and why you make certain decisions under certain conditions. And I found it fascinating. I wish I'd read it while I was a consultant. I might have been even better with my clients, but I'm very happy that I read it right now.
Oh, awesome. I'm looking forward to reading that as well because I've read the first one, but not the second one. So thanks for those suggestions. Well, very good. And then I guess, Nishant, if folks wanted to learn more about Oyo or yourself, do you have any links or information you'd like to share with our guests?
Yeah, I mean, we just filed our prospectus for an IPO. It's a massive document,
Congrats.
but I can send the link for that, and I
Yeah.
can tell you which pages. But yeah, I think there are a couple of websites, and maybe I'll like send them over, and you can include it in the link.
Yeah, we'll drop them in the link for the description. And then just for all of our first time listeners, make sure you hit subscribe either on Apple, Amazon, or Spotify, just so you're notified of future episodes. If you want to see or hear past episodes, you can always check out our YouTube channel or beyondconsulting.info. And then lastly, if you want to get in touch with me or anybody else at ECA, it's going to be eca-partners.com. Nishant, thank you so much for joining. For everybody else, we will talk to you next week.